What would you do if, right in the middle of your wedding, your neighbor suddenly played secret footage exposing your late-night party in front of both families? And your husband responded by handing you an envelope, not with vows, but with legal papers. I had always prided myself on maintaining the perfect image. At 32, I was Evelune Darrow, a successful HR assistant with a beautiful home, a stable marriage to Martin, and our 7-year-old son, Liam. From the outside, everything looked flawless, but perfection, I had learned, was exhausting. Martin had become so distant lately. At 34, my husband was methodical about everything: his accounting work, his morning routines, even the way he folded laundry. But somewhere along the way, he had become methodical about our marriage too. Conversations felt scripted. Intimacy had become scheduled. I felt like I was living with a roommate rather than a lover. That's when Derek Vaughan entered my life. 29, charming, and refreshingly spontaneous, Derek worked in our company's marketing department. Unlike Martin's calculated responses, Derek laughed easily and made me feel alive again. What started as friendly workplace conversations gradually evolved into something more dangerous. "You're working late again tonight?" Martin asked one Tuesday evening, barely looking up from his laptop as I gathered my purse and keys. "Big project deadline," I replied smoothly, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. "Don't wait up." Martin's fingers paused over his keyboard for just a moment. "Which project is that again?" "The employee satisfaction survey analysis. I told you about it last week." The lie came so naturally now that I almost believed it myself. "Right." His voice was flat, unreadable. "Drive safely." As I headed toward the door, I heard Liam call from upstairs. "Mum, can you read me a story before you go?" My heart clenched. "Daddy will read to you tonight, sweetheart. Mommy has to work." "But you always have to work now." Liam's small voice carried a note of confusion that made my stomach twist. "I'll make it up to you this weekend, baby, I promise." Martin finally looked up, his brown eyes studying my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Everything okay at the office? You seem stressed lately." "I'm fine," I said quickly. "Just busy. You know how it is." But as I drove to meet Derek at his apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that Martin's questions weren't as casual as they seemed. Had he noticed something? The thought sent a chill through me, but I pushed it aside. Martin was always suspicious about something. He questioned everything: grocery receipts, phone calls, even why I changed my perfume. His paranoia wasn't my problem. Derek's apartment was a welcome contrast to the suffocating routine at home. Where Martin's space was organized and predictable, Derek's was lived in and exciting. Candles flickered on the coffee table, wine glasses waited to be filled, and jazz music played softly in the background. "You look beautiful," Derek said as he opened the door, pulling me into his arms before I could even step inside. For the next few hours, I forgot about Martin's suspicious questions and Liam's disappointed voice. Derek made me feel desirable, interesting, worth pursuing. When he looked at me, I saw passion instead of obligation. It was nearly midnight when I finally returned home. The house was dark, except for the porch light Martin always left on for me. I slipped inside quietly, expecting to find him asleep, but he was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a stack of papers. "How was work?" he asked without looking up. "Fine, productive." I kicked off my heels and headed toward the stairs. "You should get some sleep. It's late." "Evelune." His voice stopped me halfway up the first step. "Where exactly were you tonight?" My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "I told you, at the office." "The office building locks at 9 p.m. Security confirmed that when I called." The words hit me like ice water. "You called security? Martin, that's—" I turned to face him, injecting hurt and indignation into my voice. "That's incredibly controlling. Do you not trust me?" "I'm trying to trust you," he said quietly, "but your stories don't add up anymore." The late nights, the weekend work emergencies, the way you guard your phone like it contains state secrets. Maybe if you showed more interest in our relationship, instead of obsessing over my schedule, I wouldn't need to find emotional support elsewhere, I shot back, immediately regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. Martin's head snapped up. Emotional support elsewhere? What does that mean? It means I have friends, Martin. People who actually listen when I talk instead of interrogating me like a suspect. I was deflecting now, turning his legitimate concerns into attacks on his character. Your jealousy is becoming a real problem. This isn't about jealousy, Evelune. This is about honesty. And this conversation is about control, I countered. I'm going to bed. Some of us have real work to do tomorrow. As I climbed the stairs, I heard Martin's chair scrape against the kitchen floor. Through the window on the landing, I caught a glimpse of movement in the apartment building next door. Our neighbor Tara's silhouette was visible in her window, and for a moment, I wondered if she had heard our argument through the thin walls. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The thought made me uncomfortable, but I pushed it aside. Tara Vaughan was a quiet woman in her 30s who kept to herself. Even if she had heard something, what could she possibly do about it? I fell asleep that night convincing myself that Martin's suspicions were just another example of his controlling nature. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that I was playing a dangerous game. I silenced that voice the same way I had learned to silence my guilt, by reminding myself that I deserved happiness, even if it came at a cost. The tension at home continued to escalate over the following weeks. Martin's questions became more pointed, his observations more detailed. He started paying attention to things he had previously ignored: the mileage on my car, the times I received text messages, even the way I dressed for work. "That's a new blouse," he commented one morning as I poured coffee into my travel mug. "I've had it for months," I lied smoothly. "I don't remember seeing it before." "You don't pay attention to my clothes, Martin. You barely notice when I'm in the room." It was a cruel thing to say, and I watched him flinch, but cruelty had become my defense mechanism. Every time Martin got close to the truth, I redirected the conversation to his failings as a husband. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was criticizing him for the very emotional distance that had driven me to Derek in the first place. But acknowledging that would mean accepting responsibility, and I wasn't ready for that level of honesty. My relationship with Derek was intensifying too. What had started as harmless flirtation had evolved into something that consumed my thoughts. He sent me funny texts throughout the day, remembered details about conversations Martin had forgotten, and made me feel like the most important person in his world. "We should go somewhere together," Derek suggested one evening as we shared dinner at his apartment. "A real date, not just hiding in my place." "You know I can't do that," I replied, though the idea thrilled me. "People might see us." "So? We're just two colleagues having dinner. There's nothing wrong with that." He was right, of course. On the surface, there would be nothing inappropriate about two coworkers sharing a meal. It was the underlying intimacy that made it dangerous, the way Derek's hand lingered on mine, the way he looked at me like he wanted to devour me, the way I felt completely alive in his presence. "There's that new Italian place downtown," I heard myself saying. "Maybe we could try it this weekend." Derek's smile was radiant. "Saturday night?" "Saturday night." When I got home that evening, I found Martin helping Liam with his math homework at the kitchen table. The sight should have filled me with warmth. My husband patiently explaining fractions to our son, both of their heads bent over the worksheet. Instead, it made me feel trapped. "How was your evening?" Martin asked without looking up. "Fine. Just grabbed dinner with some colleagues after work." "Anyone I know?" The question seemed innocent enough, but I detected an edge in his voice. "Just people from the office. You wouldn't know them." Liam looked up from his homework, Can we have pizza tomorrow night? Tommy's mom always makes pizza on Fridays. We'll see, sweetheart, I said, ruffling his hair. Mummy might have to work late again. You always work late now, Liam said, echoing his complaint from the previous week. Don't you like being home with us anymore? The question hit me like a physical blow. Of course I like being home with you, baby. Mommy just has a very important job. Martin's pen stopped moving across the paper. More important than your family? Don't, I warned. Don't start this in front of Liam. Start what? I'm just asking a question. You're being passive-aggressive, and it's not fair to put Liam in the middle of your insecurities. I saw Martin's jaw tighten, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned back to Liam's homework with forced cheerfulness. Okay, buddy, let's tackle this next problem. As I watched them work together, I felt a familiar pang of guilt. Martin wasn't a bad father, or even a bad husband. He was reliable, responsible, and devoted to our family. But reliability felt like a cage when what I craved was passion. Saturday night arrived, and I told Martin I was having dinner with my friend Jessica from college. The lie came so easily that I barely registered it as deception anymore. I had become an expert at creating alternate realities where my actions were justified and my marriage was the problem. The Italian restaurant was perfect, dimly lit, intimate, with small tables that encouraged quiet conversation. Derek had reserved a corner booth where we could talk without being overheard. He looked handsome in his dark blue shirt, and the way he stood when I arrived made me feel like a woman worth pursuing. You look incredible, he said, kissing my cheek as I slid into the booth. So do you. We ordered wine and fell into the easy conversation that had drawn me to Derek in the first place. He told me about his childhood in California, his dreams of starting his own marketing firm, his thoughts on everything from politics to poetry. Unlike my conversations with Martin, which had become focused on logistics and schedules, talking with Derek felt like intellectual and emotional foreplay. I've been thinking about us a lot lately, Derek said as we shared tiramisu for dessert. What about us? About where this is going, what we want from each other. My heart raced. What do you want? I want to be with you, really be with you, not just stolen hours in my apartment. The words hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. Derek, you know my situation is complicated. It doesn't have to be. You could leave him. I have a son. Plenty of divorced parents raise happy children. You could be happy, Evelune. We could be happy together. The possibility he was offering was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. A life with Derek would mean passion, adventure, the kind of love that made you feel alive. But it would also mean destroying the stability I had built, hurting Liam, and admitting that I had been living a lie. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, but don't think too long. Life is short, and we deserve to be happy. As Derek walked me to my car, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me deeply. For a moment, I forgot about everything else, Martin's suspicions, Liam's confusion, the web of lies I had constructed. There was only Derek's mouth on mine and the promise of a different life. I drove home in a daze, Derek's words echoing in my mind. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had convinced myself that he was right. I did deserve to be happy. If Martin had been a better husband, if he had fought harder for our marriage, if he had made me feel valued and desired, I never would have looked elsewhere. The house was quiet when I entered. Martin was reading in the living room, and he looked up when I came in. How was dinner with Jessica? He asked. Good. We had a lot to catch up on. I'm glad you got to see her. It's been a while. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. His expression was neutral, but there was a tension in his posture that hadn't been there when I left. Is everything okay? I asked. Everything's fine. I'm just tired. I think I'll head to bed. As he passed me on his way to the stairs, he paused. Evelune, I love you. I hope you know that. Whatever problems we're having, I love you and I want to work them out. The The sincerity in his voice made my chest tight. "I love you too," I whispered, and in that moment, I meant it. The problem was that I also loved Derek, and I was beginning to realize that loving two people at once was going to destroy us all. The following week brought an unexpected complication. Tara Vaughan, our neighbor, knocked on our door on Wednesday evening while Martin was helping Liam with his science project, and I was preparing dinner. "I'm sorry to bother you," Tara said when I opened the door. She was a petite woman with short brown hair and kind eyes, the type of person who baked cookies for new neighbors and remembered everyone's birthdays. "But I wanted to talk to you about the noise." "Noise?" I kept my expression puzzled, though my heart rate spiked. "From your apartment. Well, not your apartment exactly, but this is awkward." Tara shifted uncomfortably. "I live right next door to the building where some of your friends have been gathering. The walls are pretty thin, and there's been some loud music and talking late at night. Last Friday, it went until almost 2 a.m. Friday night. The night I had told Martin I was working late, but had actually been at Derek's apartment, celebrating his promotion with wine and music that had apparently been louder than we realized." "I'm not sure what you're referring to," I said carefully. "We don't have any friends in that building." Tara's brow furrowed. "But I saw you coming and going. You and a man with dark hair. I assumed he was a friend of yours and Martin's." My mouth went dry. "I think you must be mistaken." "I don't think so. I have a pretty good memory for faces, and I've lived here for 3 years. I know all the neighbors." Tara's voice was gentle but persistent. "Look, I don't want to cause trouble. I just need the noise to stop. I have to get up early for work." "Of course," I said quickly. "If there's been any disturbance, I apologize. I'll make sure to talk to whoever it is." Tara studied my face for a moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see right through my lies. "Thank you. I appreciate it." After she left, I stood in the doorway trying to process what had just happened. Tara had seen me with Derek. She knew I had been in that building multiple times, knew that I had lied about not having friends there. The question was, what would she do with that information? "Who was that?" Martin asked, appearing behind me. "Tara from next door. She was complaining about noise from one of the other buildings." "What kind of noise?" "I don't know. Music or something. I told her we'd keep it down." The lie felt heavier this time, weighted with the knowledge that Martin could easily verify the story by talking to Tara himself. "We haven't been making any noise," Martin said, his tone thoughtful. "No, of course not. She must have us confused with someone else." Martin nodded slowly, but I caught him glancing toward Tara's building with a strange expression. That night, I lay awake wondering if I had managed to deflect his curiosity or if I had inadvertently raised more questions. My anxiety proved justified when Martin brought up the conversation again the next evening. "I've been thinking about what Tara said yesterday," he mentioned casually as we cleaned up after dinner. "What about it? It's strange that she would come to us about noise we weren't making. Why not go directly to whoever was actually causing the problem?" "Maybe she wasn't sure which apartment it was coming from," I suggested, focusing intently on loading the dishwasher. "Maybe. Or maybe she knows exactly who was making the noise and was trying to be diplomatic about it." The implication hung in the air between us. Martin was too smart to miss the logical inconsistencies in my story, and I was running out of ways to explain them away. "I don't know what you're suggesting," I said, though we both knew exactly what he was suggesting. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just trying to understand why our neighbor would come to us about a noise complaint that doesn't involve us." That weekend, I made the mistake of meeting Derek at his apartment again. We had planned to be more careful about the noise, but Derek had prepared a surprise dinner to celebrate our 1-month anniversary of whatever we were calling our relationship. The wine flowed freely, the music was romantic, and by the time we realized how late it had gotten, it was nearly midnight. "I should go," I said reluctantly, gathering my clothes from Derek's bedroom floor. "Stay," Derek murmured, pulling me back down onto the bed. "Tell him you're staying at Jessica's." "I can't. Liam has a soccer game tomorrow morning. I promised I'd be there. 1 more hour, Derek negotiated, his lips finding the sensitive spot on my neck that made me forget everything else. 1 hour turned into 2, and it was almost 2 a.m. when I finally crept out of Derek's building. The parking lot was empty except for my car and a few others belonging to residents. I didn't see any lights on in Tara's apartment, but that didn't mean she wasn't awake. The next morning brought consequences I hadn't anticipated. Martin was already dressed and making breakfast when I stumbled into the kitchen, still groggy from my late night. "You missed Liam's bedtime story again," he said, without looking up from the pancake batter. "I know, I'm sorry. The work dinner ran later than expected." "Work dinner on a Saturday night?" "It was a client event. You know how these things go." Martin set down his whisk and turned to face me. "Evelune, I called your office yesterday afternoon to see if you wanted me to bring you lunch. They said you had left early for the weekend." My blood turned to ice. "Who did you talk to?" "The receptionist. She said you had signed out around noon." Think fast, I told myself. Find an explanation that makes sense. "The client dinner wasn't at the office," I said. "It was at a hotel downtown. I went home first to change." "You were gone for 14 hours to change clothes and attend a dinner." "There was a networking event afterward, and then some of us went for drinks." Each lie built on the last, creating a tower of deception that grew more unstable with every addition. Martin stared at me for a long moment. "I see." But I could tell from his expression that he didn't see at all, or rather, he was beginning to see too much. The situation deteriorated further when Tara knocked on our door again that afternoon. This time, Martin answered. "Hi, Tara," I heard him say from the kitchen. "What can we do for you?" "I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the noise," Tara replied. "It happened again last night. Same apartment, same late hours." "I'm sorry to hear that. Did you talk to the building manager?" "I did, but they said they need more specific information about who's causing the disturbance. I was wondering, and this might sound strange, but do you have any friends or relatives who might be staying in that building?" My heart stopped. From where I stood in the kitchen, I could see Martin's profile as he processed Tara's question. "Not that I know of," he said slowly. "Why do you ask?" "I've seen someone who looks familiar going in and out of the building, a woman who resembles your wife. I thought maybe she had mentioned having friends there." The silence stretched so long that I wondered if Martin had heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I'll ask Evelune about it. If she knows anything that might help, we'll let you know." "Thank you. I really appreciate it." When Martin closed the door and turned toward the kitchen, I pretended to be absorbed in organizing the spice cabinet, but I could feel his eyes on me, could sense the questions forming in his mind. "Tara says she's seen someone who looks like you going in and out of the building where the noise complaints are coming from," he said. "That's odd," I replied, not trusting myself to look at him. "Maybe I have a doppelganger." "Maybe," Martin agreed, but his tone suggested he wasn't buying my casual dismissal any more than I was. That night, as I lay in bed next to my husband, I realized that my carefully constructed double life was beginning to crumble. Tara had seen too much. Martin was asking too many questions, and my lies were becoming impossible to maintain. The smart thing would have been to end things with Derek immediately, to focus on repairing my marriage before it was too late. But Derek had awakened something in me that I wasn't ready to give up. The passion, the excitement, the feeling of being truly desired. It was like a drug, and I was already addicted. Instead of ending the affair, I decided I needed to be more careful. What I didn't realize was that being more careful was no longer enough. The damage had already been done, and the evidence was mounting in ways I couldn't control or anticipate. 3 months later, Martin and I were renewing our vows. It had been his idea, a surprise suggestion that caught me completely off guard. "I think we should have a renewal ceremony," he announced over breakfast one Tuesday morning in March. "A what?" I nearly choked on my coffee. A vow renewal. It's been 8 years since our wedding, and I feel like we've both changed. Maybe it would be good to recommit to each other publicly. The irony was staggering. Here I was, deeper into my affair with Derek than ever, and Martin wanted to renew our marriage vows. My first instinct was to refuse, to make excuses about the expense or the time commitment, but something in Martin's expression stopped me. He looked hopeful in a way I hadn't seen in months. Despite all my lies and deceptions, despite the growing distance between us, he was still fighting for our marriage. The realization should have filled me with guilt. Instead, it filled me with resentment. Why couldn't he have fought this hard before I found Derek? Why did it take the threat of losing me to make him pay attention to our relationship? I suppose we could do something small, I heard myself saying. Just immediate family. Martin's face lit up. Really? You'd want to do that? Sure, if it's important to you. It's important to us, he corrected gently, to our family. As we planned the ceremony over the following weeks, I found myself living in an increasingly surreal reality. During the day, I helped Martin choose flowers and select a venue, while secretly texting Derek about our weekend plans. In the evenings, I discussed vow renewals with my husband while mentally composing messages to my lover. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting, but I had become an expert at compartmentalizing. My life with Martin existed in one box, my relationship with Derek in another, and I had convinced myself that as long as I kept the boxes separate, everything would be fine. Derek, however, was becoming increasingly frustrated with our arrangement. A vow renewal, he said incredulously when I told him about Martin's plan. Are you serious? It's just a formality, I assured him. It doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything, Evelune. You're literally promising to be faithful to another man while you're sleeping with me. The promises won't mean anything. They're just words. Derek stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. If they're just words, then why are you going through with it? Because refusing would raise too many questions. This is easier. Easier for who? I didn't have a good answer for that question, so I deflected. I thought you understood my situation. I understood that you were unhappy in your marriage and looking for a way out. I didn't understand that you were planning to publicly recommit to staying in it. Derek, please, this doesn't change how I feel about you. Doesn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're choosing him. I'm not choosing anyone. I'm just trying to keep the peace until I figure out what to do. But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't entirely true. The vow renewal wasn't just about keeping the peace. Part of me, a part I didn't want to examine too closely, was genuinely touched by Martin's gesture. Despite everything, he still loved me enough to fight for our marriage. The rehearsal was scheduled for the Friday evening before our Saturday ceremony. We had chosen the same church where we had originally married, and seeing it again brought back memories I had tried to suppress. Martin in his tuxedo, looking nervous and happy. My dress, which had belonged to my grandmother. The way Martin's hands had shaken as he slipped the ring onto my finger. You okay? Martin asked as we stood in the vestibule, waiting for the coordinator to begin the rehearsal. Just nostalgic, I replied, which was partly true. Our families had gathered for the occasion. Martin's mother, Clara, elegant and sharp-eyed as always, watched everything with the attention of a general, surveying a battlefield. My mother, Vivienne, fluttered around taking pictures and offering unsolicited advice about flowers and music. Liam, now 8 and growing taller every day, fidgeted in his small suit as the coordinator explained his role as ring-bearer. He had been excited about the ceremony when we first told him about it, but lately he seemed confused by the tension he sensed between Martin and me. Why are you and Daddy getting married again? He had asked the night before. We're not getting married again, sweetheart, I explained. We're just reminding everyone that we love each other. But you already love each other, right? Of course we do. Then why do you need to remind people? Children had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things that adults spent years avoiding. The rehearsal itself was awkward. Martin and I went through the motions of the ceremony, but there was a stiffness between us that everyone could sense. When it came time to practice our vows, we both stumbled over words that should have been meaningful. We'll work on that tomorrow, the coordinator said diplomatically. After the rehearsal, both families gathered at a nearby restaurant for dinner. The conversation was strained, with long pauses and forced smiles. Clara kept shooting me searching looks, while Vivian overcompensated with loud chatter about wedding traditions and family history. It was during the main course that Tara appeared. I was picking at my salmon when I noticed a familiar figure at the restaurant's entrance. Tara Vaughn stood near the hostess station, scanning the dining room. When her eyes met mine, she smiled and walked over to our table. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she said, addressing the group but looking directly at me. "I just wanted to congratulate you on your vow renewal. It's such a beautiful thing when couples recommit to each other." "Thank you," Martin replied warmly. "That's very kind of you to say." "I actually wanted to give you this," Tara continued, pulling a small wrapped gift from her purse. "It's just something small for your ceremony tomorrow." As she handed the gift to Martin, her eyes met mine again. There was something in her expression that made my stomach clench, a knowing look that suggested she understood more about my situation than she was letting on. "You didn't need to do that," Martin said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "I wanted to. You're lucky to have each other." Again, that meaningful look in my direction. Not everyone gets a second chance to make things right. After Tara left, Martin unwrapped the gift. Inside was a small picture frame with an engraving that read, "Truth is the foundation of all lasting relationships." "How thoughtful," Clara commented, examining the frame. "Your neighbor seems like a lovely woman." "She is," Martin agreed. "Very observant, too. She notices everything that goes on in the neighborhood." The emphasis he placed on the word everything made my blood run cold. As the evening progressed, I found myself glancing toward the restaurant entrance, half expecting Tara to return with more pointed observations about truth and relationships. When we finally returned home, Martin and I went through our separate bedtime routines in uncomfortable silence. As I brushed my teeth, I caught his reflection in the bathroom mirror. He was standing in the doorway, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Second thoughts?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "About tomorrow? No, about us?" He paused. "I hope we can really make a fresh start, Evelune. I hope tomorrow means something." "Of course it will mean something." "Good, because I've been thinking a lot about our marriage lately, about what we both want from it going forward." There was something in his tone that made me turn to face him fully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I think it's time for complete honesty between us. No more secrets, no more half-truths. If we're going to renew our vows, we should mean them." My mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Martin stepped closer, and I could see my own reflection in his eyes. "Tomorrow is about new beginnings, Evelune. But new beginnings require ending old patterns." "Martin, you're being cryptic. If you have something to say, just say it." "Tomorrow," he said quietly. "I'll say everything I need to say tomorrow." As he turned and walked toward our bedroom, I stood frozen in the bathroom, toothbrush still in my hand. Something had shifted in Martin's demeanor over the past few weeks, something I had been too distracted to notice. The way he watched me, the careful phrasing of his questions, the calm certainty in his voice, it all suggested a man who had moved beyond suspicion to knowledge. But knowledge of what, exactly? And more importantly, what was he planning to do about it? I spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. Martin couldn't know about Derek. I had been careful, discreet. Yes, there had been some close calls with Tara's observations, but nothing concrete enough to prove anything. Yet as dawn approached, and our vow renewal ceremony drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap of my own making. The question was whether it was too late to escape. The morning of our vow renewal dawned bright and clear. I woke to find Martin, already dressed in his dark suit, standing by the bedroom window with a cup of coffee. He looked handsome and composed, but there was something different about his posture, a stillness that reminded me of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. "Big day," I said, trying to inject cheerfulness into my voice. "Yes, it is." He turned to face me, and I was struck by how calm he seemed. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "Good, because there's no going back after today." The phrasing was odd, but before I could ask what he meant, Liam burst into the room, excited about wearing his new suit and carrying the rings. The morning became a blur of preparations: hair, makeup, last-minute adjustments to my dress. I had chosen a simple cream-colored sheath that was elegant without trying to recreate my original wedding gown. My mother arrived early to help with final preparations, full of nervous energy and unsolicited advice. "You look beautiful, darling," Vivian said as she fastened my necklace. "Martin is so lucky to have you. Not every man gets a wife willing to renew her commitment after 8 years. Not every wife gets a husband worth renewing with," I replied automatically, though the words felt hollow. "He's a good man, Evelune. Steady, reliable, devoted to his family. Those qualities matter more than passion in the long run." If only she knew how much I had come to resent those very qualities, the steadiness that felt like stagnation, the reliability that felt like predictability, the devotion that felt like obligation. We arrived at the church an hour before the ceremony to take photos and handle final details. The sanctuary looked beautiful, decorated with white roses and soft lighting. About 30 people had gathered: immediate family, a few close friends, and some neighbors, including Tara, who smiled warmly when she saw me. "You look radiant," Tara said, kissing my cheek. "I'm so happy for you both." "Thank you for coming, and thank you for the lovely gift." "I meant every word of the inscription," she replied, holding my gaze just a moment longer than necessary. As the ceremony time approached, I found myself growing increasingly nervous. Martin had been cordial but distant all morning, and there was an energy in the room that I couldn't quite identify. Clara kept checking her watch and whispering to other family members. Even Liam seemed subdued, clutching the ring pillow with unusual solemnity. "Places, everyone," the coordinator announced. "We're ready to begin." The processional music started, and I took my position at the back of the sanctuary. Martin was already at the altar, hands clasped behind his back, watching the entrance with an expression of patient expectation. As I began my walk down the aisle, I noticed several guests had their phones out, recording the ceremony. When I reached the altar, Martin took my hands in his. They were steady and warm, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the love that had brought us together in the first place. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness Martin and Evelune as they renew their commitment to each other." The familiar words washed over me as I stood facing my husband. This was the moment when I should have been filled with joy and renewed purpose. Instead, I felt like an actress playing a role in a play I no longer understood. We had reached the point where we were supposed to recite our personal vows, when Martin cleared his throat and stepped slightly away from me. "Before we continue," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary, "there's something I need to share with everyone here today." The minister looked confused. "This isn't part of the ceremony we rehearsed." "I know, but it's necessary." Martin's eyes never left mine. "You see, renewal of vows should be based on honesty and truth, and there are some truths that need to be acknowledged before we can move forward." My heart began to pound. "Martin, what are you doing?" "I'm doing what should have been done months ago." He turned slightly to address our gathered family and friends. "I want everyone to understand exactly what kind of commitment we're renewing here today." "Martin, stop." My voice was barely a whisper. "Tara," Martin called out, "would you mind sharing what you brought to show everyone?" I turned to see Tara standing near the back of the sanctuary, holding what looked like a tablet. Her expression was apologetic but resolute. "I'm sorry, Evelune," she said quietly. "But Martin asked me to bring this, and I think people deserve to know the truth." "What truth?" Vivian demanded from the front row. "What's going on here?" Tara moved to the front of the sanctuary and connected her tablet to the church's projection system. Suddenly, the wall behind the altar was illuminated with a video image. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed the entrance to Derek's apartment building, time-stamped with dates and times from the past several months. And there I was, entering and leaving the building at various hours, sometimes staying until well past midnight. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the audio, voices carrying through thin walls, laughter, music, and conversations that left no doubt about the intimate nature of what was happening inside Derek's apartment. "Turn it off," I said desperately. "Please, just turn it off." But Tara continued the playback, showing clip after clip of my visits to Derek's building. The timestamps corresponded perfectly with nights I had told Martin I was working late or having dinner with friends. The sanctuary was dead silent, except for the sound of the video. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes staring at me, could see the shock and disgust on the faces of people I had known for years. "Martin," I whispered, "please don't do this." "Do what, Evelune? Tell the truth? Show everyone who you really are? I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you've been lying to me for months? Can you explain why you've been carrying on an affair while planning to renew your vows to me?" The word affair hung in the air like a physical presence. Liam, who had been standing beside us throughout the ceremony, began to cry. Clara stood up from her seat, her face white with fury. "How dare you," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you humiliate my son like this, in front of his family, in front of his child?" "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I never meant to hurt anyone." "But you did hurt people," Martin said quietly. "You hurt me, you hurt Liam, you hurt everyone who believed in our marriage." Vivian had pushed her way to the front of the sanctuary. "This is a setup," she declared. "Martin, how could you ambush your wife like this? If you had concerns about your marriage, you should have discussed them privately." "I tried," Martin replied. "For months I tried to talk to Evelune about the distance between us, about her lies, about the changes in her behavior. She turned every conversation back on me, made me feel like I was paranoid and controlling." "Because you were being controlling," I shot back, desperation making me cruel. "You questioned everything I did, everywhere I went. You made me feel like a prisoner in my own marriage. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to find someone who actually cared about my happiness." The words were out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted them. But it was too late. The admission hung between us like a chasm that could never be bridged. Martin nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I was hoping," he said quietly, "that when confronted with the evidence, you might show some genuine remorse, that you might take responsibility for what you've done and try to make amends." "I'm sorry." "No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you're being humiliated. But you're not sorry for the affair itself. Even now, you're trying to justify it by blaming me." He was right, and we both knew it. Even in this moment of ultimate exposure, I was more angry about being trapped than ashamed of my actions. "This envelope contains divorce papers," Martin continued, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. "Custody arrangements for Liam. Financial settlements. Everything has been prepared according to the evidence of your adultery." "You can't do this," I said desperately. "We can work through this. We can go to counseling." "The time for counseling was 6 months ago, when you first started lying to me. The time for working through this was before you decided our marriage vows meant nothing." He handed me the envelope. and I could feel its weight, not just the physical weight of the papers inside, but the weight of finality. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martin said, addressing our stunned guests, "I apologize for the deception, but I felt it was important for everyone to understand the truth before witnessing what they thought was a renewal of our marriage vows. There will be no renewal today. There will be no more marriage at all." As he walked past me toward the sanctuary exit, he paused. "Liam will be staying with me. Your belongings will be packed and ready for pickup by tomorrow evening. Your lawyer can contact mine about the details." "Martin, wait." But he was already gone, taking Liam with him. Clara followed, stopping only to look at me with undisguised contempt. "You've destroyed a good man and broken that little boy's heart," she said. "I hope it was worth it." One by one, our guests filed out of the sanctuary, leaving me standing alone at the altar, in my cream-colored dress, holding divorce papers instead of wedding vows. The projection screen still glowed with frozen images of my deception, and the silence was deafening. Vivian was the last to approach me. "Darling," she said, her voice thick with tears, "what have you done?" I looked down at the envelope in my hands, at the legal documents that would dissolve 8 years of marriage and reshape my entire life. For the first time in months, I couldn't think of a lie to tell or a way to shift the blame to someone else. "I don't know," I whispered. "I honestly don't know."